Hello, and welcome to Sentient Sock Puppet. My name is David, and I will be reviewing movies. Today, I will be reviewing a semi-relevant film, The Notorious Man of Steel. Produced by Christopher Nolan and directed by Zack Snyder, Man of Steel is DC's most daring attempt to rival the increasingly popular Marvel franchise since the Batman trilogy. Now, normally I'm a fan of Christopher Nolan's work, including the Batman trilogy, and I also technically haven't seen anything else by Zack Snyder, so either way you look at it, I have nothing against the people who made this movie. My only problem is with the end result. People say that Superman has never had a good movie, and Man of Steel is presumably by no means an exception. Still, there are some things to enjoy about this movie, even though it's all bogged down by a dark, depressing plot and appearance that takes itself way too seriously. Plot-wise, Man of Steel was a near disaster. First, we watched an entire movie take place on the planet Krypton. It was a long subplot depicting politics, betrayals, and other plot elements leading up to Kal-El's birth, all of which have little relevance to the rest of the movie, other than explaining General Zod's motivations. After that, the basic premise of the movie is generally the same as any other adaptation of Superman, only with certain elements placed differently chronologically, such as the conflict with Zod being placed apparently before Lex Luthor has any involvement with the plot, and the fact that Lois Lane learns of Clark Kent's identity before he even puts the suit on. The bottom line is, for the first half of this movie, there is no plot. Just flashback after flashback of whining and deepness, such as the philosophies of Clark Kent's father, who insists on keeping his son from doing any acts of heroism for no discernible reason, other than an overly dramatized, not letting people find out sort of deal. In fact, every time someone learns that Superman is, well, super, they all say the same thing. If people found out there was someone like him, do you know what would happen? Apparently they would all ask, if people found out there was someone like him, do you know what would happen? Superman's identity is revealed time and time again in an hour-long sequence of secret journalism, flashbacks, and deep thought. After General Zod lands on Earth to pick up where the plot of the entire other movie that took place on Krypton left off, we are presented with a plotline that is exactly the same as that of The Dark Knight. Zod demands that everyone hands Superman over to him, or else he will commit acts of terrorism. As effective as this plotline was in The Dark Knight, in Man of Steel, it's just a watered-down attempt to recreate what worked in the past. This is quickly resolved, however, and the film turns over to another hour or so of fighting, destruction, and Superman not even trying to rescue anyone. A lot of the second half of this film is big urban disasters, getting a lot of screen time, and you sit there thinking, yeah, I get it, Superman shows up and saves them, and then he doesn't, and they all die, and you're like, wow, this is stupid. I think we're supposed to be like, whoa, that flying alien with super strength couldn't save those people, just like real life! But it wasn't even done that well. There was barely any suspense. In fact, the only civilians that I didn't care about were the civilians I was supposed to care about. At the last minute, they pretend that some of the workers at the Daily Planet are actual characters, when in reality, some of them hadn't even appeared on the screen prior to that scene. All in all, the plotline of Man of Steel was the typical Save the World plotline with all the positive energy sucked out of it. Not only was it a boring, unoriginal plot, but whatever cliches might have made it a more bearable experience were taken out, all in a misguided attempt at being hardcore. And that takes us to the writing. Every line of this film was supposed to be super deep and super poetic, but it only sounded deep. In reality, everyone was just over-dramatizing basic plot elements and immensely overreacting to the very concept of a superhero. Every character in this film was unrealistically serious, bland, and just plain uninteresting, which brings me to the characters and acting. First off, we have Henry Cavill as Kal-El/Clark Kent. He's only called Superman once as a joke, but we're used to that kind of thing by now. His character is very reserved, and never makes any extreme emotions, other than screaming loudly after every traumatic event. Nevertheless, This Superman is a constant whiner who, you guessed it, isn't happy with having to save the world. Next, we move on to Amy Adams as herself. While she is a good actress, she does not portray an accurate Lois Lane. One of her only sassy lines is something I'd rather not repeat, and she spends most of the movie just furthering the plot with her journalism and saying the same overdramatic lines that anyone else might say. This is all mostly the fault of the writing and the overall tone. Amy Adams is capable of more personality, but in this case, personality wasn't allowed. And that brings me back to my original point. The characters were all bland, and I had trouble caring about any of them. In fact, if I was just reading the script, I'd have difficulty telling any of them apart. Visually, well, let me take the time to explain that I will review every movie based on visuals, but in some cases, I will also review special effects separately. I only do this where applicable, because some movies don't even have special effects. So why give something a 0 for something it doesn't even incorporate in the first place? That being said, the visuals of Man of Steel were very gray and dull. It was constantly cloudy and rather depressing to look at. It's no wonder Clark Kent is such a depressed protagonist. It would seem that Smallville never has a sunny day. The special effects, on the other hand, were this movie's one and only strong point. The special effects were fantastic, though nowadays that doesn't really make a movie special. Nevertheless, there were points in this movie where I was able to get into the action and forget all the film's many flaws, even if only for a moment. I did get tired of the action eventually though, and even more tired of the destruction as the movie went on. By the time of the final battle, I just wanted the movie to be over. And even though it was a phenomenally large-scaled final battle, I was just too distracted by the movie's miserable tone to get into it. To say nothing of the ridiculous amounts of destruction that took place. Sound-wise, the movie was very loud. Music-wise, there wasn't anything wrong with the music itself. It's just that every moment of this movie was so serious and so dramatic that every moment of this movie felt like the end of another movie. It all added to the gray, depressing tone, and made it feel like I was watching that remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still. It's not that the music was bad quality-wise, it was just badly placed and it didn't really mix well with the already dull movie. Overall, Man of Steel just wasn't that great. And I guess it was the big, loud, scary, action-packed Superman movie we may or may not have been waiting for, but didn't have any good writing, acting, plot, or just general happiness to back it up. And I should also mention that since Superman did a lot more fighting than rescuing, that's also not accurate. To say nothing of how much he complained. I'm not saying superheroes shouldn't complain, but, well, yes, actually I am. That's what we have Spider-Man for. It's been done. We don't need to keep doing it. But I think this movie's greatest flaw is that somehow it hinted at what a good Superman movie should be like, and that just made the fact that it failed to meet this standard even more disappointing. It's okay if you enjoyed this movie, even I managed to find things to enjoy about it, but don't kid yourself into thinking it's deep, and definitely don't kid yourself into thinking it's realistic. Just because there's overly poetic lines and a shaky camera doesn't mean it's realistic. I'm not saying superhero movies shouldn't take themselves seriously, I'm just saying that maybe, just maybe, the goal isn't necessarily to become a swirling vortex of pain and misery. I'm not saying a bit of realism doesn't help either, though there's realism and there's realism. I'd even venture to say that not even the Batman trilogy was realistic. Rather, I'd say their attempts to be realistic resulted in a good movie. But this was not the case with Man of Steel. I would not recommend Man of Steel to small children who are easily frightened, or anyone who wants to experience happiness again. Overall, I give Man of Steel a 4 out of 10. If you want to watch an intense, action-packed superhero movie, minus all the humor, optimism, and just general positiveness that tend to go with them, Man of Steel is the movie for you. I'm not sure why you'd want that, but it's here. So there you have it, Man of Steel. Keep checking back for more movie reviews, and don't forget to subscribe. If you agree with me, disagree with me, or have any constructive criticism of my criticism, please leave a comment. Also, check out Josh's review of A Link Between Worlds, and Matey's review of The Problem Solvers. And I guess that's it. I don't know what I'll be reviewing next, but you'll find out when I review it, so see ya!